So we covered buying new, and in there we specifically dealt with depreciation and trade-in, right? Among other things. We also had parts and labor and all of that in there. We covered buying used, right? If it's at a dealership, you pay 12%. If it's privately, you only pay the 7% on the greater book or purchase. And I guess it's also worth mentioning, right, that there could be a safety mentioned and a lien search, which is 0, and parts and labor is 12, right? Parts and labor is always 12%, no matter what. If there's a tune-up, oil change, anything, 12% on both the labor, right, the hours put in, as well as the parts. And then we covered financing, right? We talked about loans, there being a down payment, talked about interest, calculated the monthly payment. We talked about principal, right? And various things. So, and I give you lots of formulas, especially for financing. I give you a long formula for buying used, especially when it's a private sale. Okay. Today we're going to touch on insurance. We already talked about leasing. And the one thing that I didn't put down here is fuel economy, right? At the beginning when I started this. So if you want an overview, that's basically liters per 100 kilometers, right? And so forth. That's all I'm going to say there for that. So that's your overview of this unit. If you'd like to have that on there, feel free to do so. And so Friday in particular, we talked about fuel economy. That's where we left off, right? And I just did 2 examples there. And so that would take you, if you go all the way to page 37 in your booklet, this is the last question we answered on page 37, okay? And in particular, right, knowing that the fuel economy, that formula is liters divided by distance, okay, times 100. So in this particular case, we had to figure out the distance between the starting and the end reading of the odometer. So it had, sometimes they'll throw questions like that at you. No problem, we'll just take the difference, plug it in, and then make sure you answer in liters, right, per 100 kilometers. That's how we answer, not percent, right? It's fuel economy, which is liters per 100 kilometers. And I will probably do at least one more example today, but for now we're going to turn over to our handout package. So just leave the page 37 in your booklet somewhere next to you there, and then go and get that package that has these questions in it. Okay, there should have been, you should have received like a bunch of handouts, and this one was in it. So let's work on that to warm up for today, okay? And then there's a second question at the back. So the first, this one deals with leasing. You can, it's an open book, okay? If you want to go and I would suggest this. Try to see if you can do this with a study sheet only, okay? If you can't do this with a study sheet, that means that you need to update it. So then you go to your notes and check and see how you would answer this particular question, right? So this has all to do with leasing, and the back has to do with financing. Okay, so that's what we're doing now. I will do the attendance as you're working, and then we're going to go over it, I would say, at least 15 minutes from now. So let's go with 15, okay? I just want to make sure that you understand that if you're not writing your test, you're at home watching the lessons for our new unit. So if you're in class right now, I'm going to give you the handouts for our next unit, which is trigonometry. And make sure you do that. Don't think you have extra time, right, to do something else, because you're gonna feel behind if you don't. Okay. So that's going to be starting on Wednesday. So there'll be basically 2 videos of our next unit, which means you have to just write down the notes, right, in the booklets that I'm going to provide you with. All right, so we've got our warm-up questions here. Tommy signed a 3-year lease. Just going to make a note that that's 36 months, right? Because sometimes months and years, right, it's one is better than the other. The payment is $199 per month. He made a $2,500 down payment and will be charged 12 cents per kilometer over the allowed mileage. The contract allows for 18,000 kilometers per year. Tommy then returns the car with 64,000 kilometers on the odometer. The guaranteed residual value is 60%. So they give you a whole bunch of information here. And so you're just going to have to be careful to extract the ones that you need for every question that follows, okay? So A, determine Tommy's monthly payment. I think that is pretty doable. And I put the marks down so you kind of have an idea of what to expect, right? How much would something like that be worth? So Tommy's monthly payment, what they mean there is, right, it's plus tax. You've got to tax that, right? So 199 times 1.12 is 222.88, okay, per month. That is really the payment that we're looking for. Granted, it should have probably said after tax, but that, right, if you just stated what they already gave you, that wouldn't be worth a mark. So B, calculate the mileage cost after tax, right? Mileage cost after tax. So I didn't give you a formula for this. And the reason why is I don't always give formulas because sometimes students think that's always the way to do it, and then they don't read the question carefully and they completely miss the point there. But if I want to calculate the mileage, this is something that I would be doing here. I guess we can just say that I would take the actual kilometers that I've driven, right? And I would subtract it by my allowance. And in this case, it said 18,000 kilometers per year. So 3 years times 18,000, that's what you were allowed to drive, right? So the difference is, if there is a difference, then you'll be over by that much. So over by, right? So you go 64,000 minus 3 times 18,000, that's 54,000, right? So you're over by 10,000 kilometers. Okay. So the cost here would be 10,000 kilometers times the 12 cents, right? They charge you this much per kilometer, right? And that's just 1,200 bucks, right? 1,200 bucks. We're going to add taxes to it. That's 1,344. That's really what I'm after there. So 2-mark question because yes, there is a lot of work involved there. So something like that, if you didn't do it exactly that way, not a big deal at all. So this is what you've driven, this is what you were allowed, subtract the 2, right, to see how much you're over by, and then 10,000 times 12 cents, that's 1,200 bucks before tax, times it by 1.12 to get the cost after tax. So that would be the full answer there. C, calculate the total cost of the lease. Here I did give you a formula, right? Lease would be the down, no tax, plus total payments, plus mileage, right? And these two are taxed, right? These two, the mileage and the payment, but you already taxed the mileage, so don't double tax, Okay, so we're just gonna take that number and plug it in there. We know what our down payment is. Our down payment, according to the question, was $2,500. Do not tax it. Plus total payments. We already know that our payment with tax is $222.88. So we're just gonna go 36 months, right? Times the $222.88. This is already tax, after tax. Okay? This is already after tax, so no need to add taxes, plus the 1344 that I have. And I'm just gonna, right, think about it. It's already taxed, so don't tax it again. So that's 2,500 plus the payments amount to, and the more work you show, the better. Okay, so let's add that up. That's 11,867.68. There's your answer. And then D, it says, I'm just going to slide it down a bit so we can read it. Calculate the cost of to purchase the car at the end of the lease after tax, if the original value was $18,999. So there's a residual value, right? The residual value would be, according to this question, if you go all the way up, it's 60% of the MSRP, or the, right, the 18,999. So we're going to figure that out. So this is not a depreciation question. This is what the car is worth at the end of the 3 years. Okay. It says after tax, so we're going to add taxes to that amount. So just leave it in your calculator and go times 1.12, and that's 12,767.33. Watch the rounding, right? Look at my calculator. It says 0.328. That rounds to 0.33. Okay. So that answers the buyout option after tax, and it's always 12%. So leasing, remember this, leasing is always 12% no matter what. There is no 5 or 7 or anything like that. It's 12%. Whatever is tax 12%. And I think it's safe to say that you will never take the whole lease amount with a down payment, right? Add it all up and then add 12%. It won't work out, because then you're taxing your down payment. So you'll have to apply the taxes separately to your payment and separately to the mileage, right? And then add it to your down payment, which is $2,500. That is it for leasing. Okay. Then we're going to go over to the second question there. So if you're at home writing this down, write down the answers quick. Okay. If you didn't get what you're supposed to get, write down the correct answer so you can give it another go and see if you come up with that. So your study sheet should have had enough information, like, for example, payment is always taxed 12%, mileage, right? Maybe have an example like what I have driven minus the allowance, right? And then taxes, that gets taxed as well. This is a tricky one here, but I made sure I put my units. This is just the 12 cents per kilometer, not the 12% tax, right? So be careful there. Backside, I'm gonna rip this out. Francis purchased a Jeep Wrangler for $36,750 after tax. Keywords there, right? It's already taxed, so don't worry about it. Normally a finance question will not ask you to add tax. She saved up $67.50 for a down payment. The rest will need to be financed over 5 years at 5.75%. She looked at her chart Mr. D gave her and saw that the table rate was $19.29 per $1,000. So that's already given to you. You don't even need a chart here. So determine the monthly payment. So we're going to do that here. The payment is, right, the price minus the down times the table rate divided by 1,000. So the price was $36,750. The down payment was $6,750. Works out beautifully, right? Table rate is $19.29. And you get, I'm just going to write down that this is $30,000 here, right? And that's $578.70 per month that you're paying. Determine the total amount paid to the bank over the 5 years. Total paid, and make sure you say to bank, okay? That means you do not add the down payment. All you do is you take the $578.70 and multiply that by 12 because it's 12 months in a year, and we'll multiply that by 5 years, right? This is really 60 months, right, that you get out of these two numbers. And so it's $578.70 times 60. That's $34,722.00. If it said how much did you pay in total for the car, you would have to add your down payment here. C. Calculate the finance charge. What is the finance charge? That's the interest. That's the interest you're going to pay in total. That's the TI, total interest. The total interest is paid by taking the total you've paid the bank minus the loan, which is $30,000. Right? The loan is always taken from whatever's in front of the table rate. This is how much you borrowed. So in this case, it's an easy mental math, right? It's just $4,722. That's the finance charge. That's your total interest paid. So I think we would have to go back to page 15 or something like that. Page 15 has 3 formulas that I gave you in your notes. There's total interest, there's just the interest, right? And then there's those formulas need to be on your study sheet, or else you'll probably be in trouble, okay? And you can use up to half of your study sheet, okay? Half a page. Front half, okay? Now, let's go back to page 37. So we can put this away. And I want to go to question example 5 on page 37. So I'm skipping some questions, right? but the ones I give you are sufficient to be able to answer questions regarding fuel economy. A 2018 Toyota Tundra has a fuel economy of 12.3 liters per 100 kilometers. That is very important, right? You highlight or circle that. If they give you the fuel economy, that means that you're not going to have to calculate it, folks, okay? If they give you the fuel economy, don't calculate it. If you make a 375 kilometer trip, calculate the total cost of fuel if it costs $1.209 per liter. Right? How would you do this? I'll give you a hint here, the steps, and this you might wanna, because a question like this is quite popular when it comes to tests, okay? I'll tell you this. Use fuel economy, right, to calculate liters needed for trip. Okay, that's the first step. Use fuel economy. Sorry, it's a bit small, I know that. So use fuel economy to calculate liters needed for trip. That's your first step. And then calculate cost. Liters times dollars per liter. Basically, that's how you're going to figure it out. And I wish I had more room there, but I'll make it work. Yes, you're right, Logan. I will do that in a bit. I'll do cross, multiply, and divide. Okay, so I will use this as my starting point. If this car uses 12.3 liters per 100 kilometers, right? If this is true, in this case, they're giving me the kilometers of the trip, right? 375. So since the kilometers are in the denominator here, I need to make sure I do the same thing on the other side of this proportion, right? And then you're going to put an X or something up here for number of liters required to make this trip. And this is something I did in the first week of warm-up, right? You find your variable, it's on the right side, go to the number below it, and in this case, you're going to have to multiply up and then divide on your way down. It works every time. Okay? So number of liters required would be 375 times 12.3 divided by 100. So we go 375 times 12.3 divided by 100. And that's 46.125 liters. Let's not round. Okay, this is how many liters you need to make this trip based on the fuel economy of the car. So what I will do is I will highlight on my proportion here, I will highlight this side because that's where I just basically used that to get me started. The question might say how many liters you have and how far of a distance can you travel. In that case, the top number will be given and this will be your unknown. Then you have to multiply down and divide up, right? So just reverse this step if it's the other way around. Okay, so this is how many liters. So cost will be 46.125 times whatever the price is. In this case, it's 1.209, right? And that would be 55.77 if you round it correctly dollars. That's how much you would need to make this trip based on that fuel economy. So find the liters needed. I use this answer here and just plug it in there. Essentially, this is also given to you, right? So you don't want to round early if you're, especially if it stops and it's going to be part of your calculation for the final answer. You don't want to round early. So this is in a nutshell. I would recommend, right? If you're given the fuel economy and you're trying to find out the cost of a trip, this is how you do it, okay? And then here's the question I was telling you about. This one isn't as long. I should have left more room for this here. Honda Accord Sport has 2.0, has a fuel economy of 9.1 liters per 100 kilometers, which makes sense, right? The lower this number, the more fuel efficient that car is. So 9.1 liters over 100 kilometers, that is given from this here. I just set it up as a fraction. And then on the other side, you know that you have 32 liters. What's the distance in kilometers that you can travel? So now your x, or your unknown, is in the denominator. Again, I will highlight this and this. Okay? You cross multiply. Since your variable's on the right side of the equation, you go to the number, right? And in this case, you go multiply down, divide up. Let's always multiply first, then divide, okay? So it's 32 times 100, divide by 9.1. And that is 351.65 kilometers. That's how far you can travel on a 32 liter fuel capacity, okay? I think I can talk about insurance tomorrow. I can cover that in about 20 minutes. So I'll do that tomorrow. There's no math there, it's just concepts. So I'm going to give you some concepts for insurance tomorrow. Before you go, I don't give a whole lot of homework, right? But I'm going to say, if you want to be confident, if you want to more practice on this, page 39 to 40. So I'll give you the answers to those questions, okay? 39 to 40. And the top is just basically different scenarios, right? Like how much you've traveled. So you figure out the distance here. I'll just give you the first one. The first one is 416 kilometers. You get that by subtracting these two. And then your fuel economy is supposed to be 12.72 liters per 100 kilometers. And how about I give you like this one here at the bottom. I think after that you will get it. This is 11.17 liters per 100 kilometers. Number 3 is 92 cents per liter. Use cross multiplying and dividing with these. It works quite well. Number 4 is 7.73 liters per 100 kilometers. Number 5 3 and 5 I didn't really cover. Basically, what that's saying is it's not as relevant. So the ones I have covered, those are the ones that are important to know. Page 40, those are the ones you should probably focus on a bit more if your time is limited. So 6, A is 1158 liters per 100 kilometers. And then you have 1467 liters per 100 kilometers. C, I'll just let you answer that. I can come back to that tomorrow and talk about it a little bit. But it's basically just FYI, right? Like the information there. And 7 really brings it all together. 7 is when you're comparing and you have to do what we just did a bunch of times. So 818 liters per 100 kilometers. And then 759 liters per 100 kilometers. And for C, the difference, I'll just give you the difference. You have to do quite a bit of work. It's 244. You're calculating, you're doing what we just did for both of these fuel economies up here. So you're going to compare city and highway, and then you're going to find out what the difference is in cost if you were to travel 150 kilometers in each scenario. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I will do that. I'll slowly scroll back so that if somebody missed it. There is 6 if you missed it. And I'll go back to the front to 39. Oh, somebody said something here. I missed it. Oh, okay. That was Logan. Is that what you were looking for? Number 2. Okay, I'm going to scroll up. Before you go, I will give you the booklets for the next unit if you're here. If you want to get started on reviewing, there's a vehicle finance test review on this package that I gave you, this one. Okay, so if you want to start reviewing and get ahead of the game, that's what I'm going to do next. Okay.